showers around on
space.
Wednesday, wetter again on Wednesday.
Imagine like cows floating in like space. There's just going to be a nightmare.
Amos Atkins with Outside Source.
So
This
human
is the
blood
extraordinary
has been
story
used in
of
these
climate
experiments.
change. Vaccines, Europe,
In
the
some
Taliban,
ways it seems,
Ukraine,
quite
symbolically
feasible,
very
but
important.
it
Let's
would
take
probably
this
also
stage by
damage the health
stage.
of the
With the
astronaut.
BBC Stephen McDonald
That
in
one says
Beijing. The West has stepped
urea on
up
it.
sanctions against
Now,
Russia. Let's
is
look
that
at some
what
of the
I think it
international
is?
reactions. Tell us what you've been hearing
Urea is
in
going to be
practical
something we're going
terms.
to be
What does that
producing in
mean? Next, we have to
abundance.
step back
And
and just
actually, when we
remind
added
ourselves
urea,
this is all part
it made the
of the same
materials
story.
up to 3 times
The
stronger.
story together with
One
Ros
of the most
Atkins.
viable
Outside
concretes
Source.
comes from a
Weekdays at 7
byproduct
on the
of
BBC
space
News
food.
channel.
We know we'll probably feed astronauts on the Moon and Mars with algae just because it's so efficient, so we could potentially produce construction materials from this algae, which we know will probably be growing anyway.
Looking at the bubbling algae growing in action, it's incredible to think its byproducts could become the building blocks of the future. And as for graphene homes knitted by robots, you'll have to watch this space.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. There are reports from the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol that buses have taken away some wounded Ukrainian soldiers. More than 1,000 Ukrainian troops have been besieged by Russian forces in the steelworks for more than a month. Can the Prime Minister unlock power sharing in Northern Ireland? He's been in Belfast today to discuss the standoff over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the anger and grief in Buffalo, New York, where a white supremacist has killed 10 black people in a racially motivated attack. Tonight, with The Context, from Rome, the former EU foreign policy advisor Natalie Tucci and the Republican Party strategist Ron Christie joins us from Washington. Hello, a warm welcome to the programme. The news emerging from the steel plant in Mariupol is hard to verify, but it does seem tonight, from the reporting of several news agencies, that the most severely wounded Ukrainians have been taken out of the plant. Around 40 wounded Ukrainians were said to need urgent treatment, and we are told around a dozen buses have left the plant in the last few hours. The Russian Ministry of Defence said those troops that do surrender would be taken to hospitals in a nearby town in separatist-held Ukraine, where they will become prisoners of war. We'll keep across that and bring you details as we get it. Let's bring in Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. He's the former commander of the US Army in Europe. He's now Pershing Chair in Strategic Studies at the Centre for European Policy Analysis. General, it's good to have you back on the programme. Can we start with the news that we're getting from Mariupol, this news that maybe 40 or so seriously wounded Ukrainian soldiers have been taken out. On the surface, that is good news. But of course, the Russians don't have a very good record of looking after prisoners of war. They're really, really strong points you make on this issue. Let me bring in our panel on this. Natalie Tucci, I know you've been tweeting about this. In fact, you made reference to the public vote in the Eurovision Song Contest and said this is how European people feel. It's a shame our leaders don't feel the same way. But let me put it to you another way. Liz Truss, the Foreign Minister here, the Foreign Secretary here, is saying we want it all back, Crimea and the Donbass. It's such a totemic issue for Russia, Crimea. Is there not a danger that that is the point you push him so far that he starts to look at nuclear tactical weapons? Yeah, indeed so. General Hodges, very good to have your company again this evening, especially so late there in Bucharest. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for the privilege.
Boris Johnson says it is still possible to find a sensible solution with the EU to a dispute over the post-Brexit trading arrangements in Northern Ireland. But in Belfast, the Prime Minister reiterated he is prepared to act unilaterally to protect the Good Friday Agreement if Brussels refuses to budge. It's expected the British government will produce legislation this week that would unilaterally scrap parts of the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol. though that legislation would take time to work its way through the parliamentary system. The Prime Minister met with all the parties today at Hillsborough Castle in Belfast. The Democratic Unionist Party, that's Northern Ireland's largest unionist party, is refusing to join the power-sharing executive until the customs border that exists in the Irish Sea is removed. Their leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, says the new customs border undermines their constitutional position within the UK. Let's bring in Mark Devonport. He's the former BBC Northern Ireland political editor. Mark, nice to see you. It seems to me that the DUP are going to reserve judgment until they see what is in this legislation proposed by Boris Johnson later this week. It's going to require pragmatism on all sides. There are congressional representatives coming over from the United States. Maybe they can bang some heads together and find a solution. Mark Devonport, thank you very much indeed for your time. Lovely to see you this evening. We'll be right back. Do stay with us. Plenty more to come.
Hello, most of us have seen rain at some stage of the day. In Scotland, it's been raining on and off for much of the day, with the exception of some sunshine in Shetland, and the rain was quite a cut.
This is all part of the same story.
Piece the story together with Rob Atkins.
Saturday and Sunday at 12:30 on the BBC News
World
Channel.
News.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. The gunman who opened fire in a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, was a white supremacist. The victims were aged between 32 and 86. We'll be speaking to a pastor from Buffalo as the black community grieve. The European Union dropped the requirement for masks on flights and in airports. And a hero's welcome for Ukraine's Eurovision winners. Tonight, with The Context from Rome, former EU Foreign Policy Advisor Natalie Tocci and the Republican Party strategist Ron Christie is in Washington. Welcome back. How does the community of Buffalo, New York process what happened to them on Saturday? On the east side of the city, an 18-year-old gunman walked into a grocery store and shot 13 people, killing 10 of them in a racially motivated hate crime. The shooter was a self-confessed white supremacist. He is known to have travelled about 200 miles from his home in Conklin, New York, choosing the east side because of its high density of black people. And he had planned it, right down to the minute, including the diagrams of where he would open fire at the Tops Friendly Market. And all the while, he was live streaming on the web what he was doing. We can talk to Ulysses Winger. He's a Buffalo City Council member and also senior pastor at the Antioch Baptist Church. Good evening to you. Pastor, our deepest sympathies and condolences to everyone there in the East Side. If anybody still wonders if white supremacy is still a threat to black people in America, here it is.
That's my message.
Ron Christie, 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield, is no less American than the man who carried out this attack. Why is this replacement theory now mainstream? 1 in 3 American adults believe there is a group of people trying to replace Native Americans for electoral purposes. And the likes of Lauren Boeberts or Marjorie Taylor Greens of this world, they can run on this theory now because it's mainstream. It's an important clarification. As I said, Ruth Whitfield, the 86-year-old lady who was shot in the grocery store, is no less American than the man who pulled the trigger. And that's an important point to remember. Pastor, I know that you've got a lot of people in your church there, and you've got some heavy days ahead of you in the coming week, but we send you our best wishes. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
If you're travelling to Europe this next week, you might be able to dispense with the face mask. From today, the EU's Aviation Safety Committee has relaxed its guidance, although there are still 12 of the 27 EU countries that will require you to wear one on inbound flights. They are Germany, Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Austria, Cyprus, Estonia, Lithuania, Malta, the Netherlands and Luxembourg. Italy, where Natalie is keeping its mandate in place until the middle of next month, and they still require passengers to wear masks on public transport. France, however, have lifted the mandate. In the United States, the federal mask mandate was overturned recently in federal court. And when you look at the cases there in the United States, they are starting to tick up again, although you can see from this graph they're a long way from where the peak was just a few months ago. I can sort of understand, Natalie, why the Italians have kept the face mask mandate in place. It was so horrendous in the first wave. I think psychologically, the Italians will need some reassuring, won't they? Yeah, okay, well, I'll be on a flight to Europe this weekend. I'll be wearing my mask because I'm going to Italy where Natalie is. So I will have mine in my pocket. Right, some breaking news. We were telling you earlier in the programme about the dozen or so buses that have left the Azovstal plant carrying soldiers. Apparently, those buses have now arrived in Novoazovsk, which is a Ukrainian town currently held by Russian troops. So these are the images that we've just got in showing people on those buses. As I say, we don't know how many were on the buses, but we know there were around 40 wounded fighters that were in desperate need of help among them. Some of them had amputations, quite difficult for amputations to be carried out in the tunnels in which they were hiding. There was no medical care, there were no proper bandages. But there are still around 600 fighters, we're told, in the plant. And a witness says that some of the evacuees that were carried out of the buses were on stretchers. It was reported earlier that Russia had agreed to give medical support to the wounded fighters at a hospital where they would then become prisoners of war. And earlier the Ukrainian military said that does not mean that they have surrendered the Azovstal plant. Now, did you watch the Eurovision Song Contest this weekend, Ron? Did you watch it?
I can't say that I did, Christian.
You didn't? Well, you missed a good show. You'll be amazed to hear that Ukraine won it. They did win. Actually, I thought the biggest story was that the UK come second. I don't know where we got all those points from. We don't normally get so many points. But in any case, the band has returned. The band members of Kalush Orchestra have returned to Ukraine to fight. The group was greeted at the Polish border by Ukrainian military personnel who turned up with a bouquet of flowers, at which point the band broke into this impromptu rendition of their winning song, Stefania. Yeah. And if you needed a sign of how much the European public is behind Ukraine, then how about this? In the public vote, 28 of the 39 countries gave Ukraine the maximum 12 points, and another 8 countries gave them 10 points. And I mean, it's pretty humbling, isn't it, Natalie, to think that they were on stage this weekend, probably the highlight of their lives, and now they're going back to the front lines to fight. Anyway, there we are. Natalie Tocci, Ron Christie, lovely to see you both. Thank you for your company this evening. We will be back same time tomorrow. Do join us for that. Good night.
Hello. Spring so far has brought a lot of talk about how
that's going to be bringing heavy thundery rain to the northeast of the United States for Monday, at risk of a few severe thunderstorms.